The sound of the glass shattering wasn't nearly as loud as the silence that followed it. A silence so heavy it felt like it could crush your lungs if you dared to breathe. 17-year-old Leo stood in the center of the garage, staring down at the wreckage of what was supposed to be his masterpiece. The intricate kinetic sculpture he had spent the last 6 months building in secret, now reduced to a pile of twisted copper wire and splintered wood. His father, a man whose hands were calloused from decades of practical, back-breaking labor, stood in the doorway, not angry, but disappointed, which was infinitely worse. He didn't say a word, just shook his head slowly, turned around, and walked back into the house, closing the door with a soft click that echoed in Leo's mind like a gunshot. That was the moment Leo decided to stop trying. It wasn't a dramatic proclamation or a tearful vow, but a quiet, internal surrender. The kind where you simply let go of the rope and let the current take you wherever it wants. For years, Leo had been told he had a gift, a way of seeing how things connected, how movement flowed. But in a town where success was measured by how heavy a load you could carry or how fast you could run a mile, his delicate, spinning contraptions seemed useless. He convinced himself that his potential was just a fantasy, a childish dream that needed to be put away so he could focus on the real world, on things that actually mattered to people like his father. The years that followed were a blur of mediocrity, a gray haze of doing just enough to get by, but never enough to be noticed. He took a job at the local warehouse, stacking boxes with a mechanical precision that required zero thought, letting his mind drift into a static numbness while his hands moved on autopilot. He watched his friends leave for college, watched them chase dreams he had convinced himself were foolish, and he stayed behind, anchoring himself to the safety of the ordinary. But the thing about potential is that it doesn't just disappear when you ignore it. It festers. It sits in the back of your mind like an itch you can't scratch, a low hum of dissatisfaction that colors every sunset a little less vibrant and makes every laugh feel a little hollow. Leo felt it most at night, lying in his childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling where he used to hang his prototypes, now just empty hooks casting long shadows in the moonlight. He told himself he was being realistic, that he was being an adult, but deep down he knew he was just afraid. He was afraid of trying again and failing, afraid of seeing that look in his father's eyes, afraid that maybe he really wasn't special after all. The turning point came on a Tuesday, a day so unremarkable it blended into all the others until the conveyor belt at the warehouse jammed. It was a massive, industrial beast of a machine, the lifeblood of the entire operation, and when it ground to a halt with a screech of tearing metal, panic set in instantly. The foreman was shouting, mechanics were scrambling, and the deadline for the biggest shipment of the year was ticking closer by the second. Leo stood back, watching the chaos unfold, watching the experts bang on the casing with wrenches and curse at the gears. He saw the problem immediately. It wasn't a broken gear or a burnt-out motor. It was a misalignment in the tension arm, a subtle shift in the physics of the belt that everyone else was missing because they were looking at the machine as a collection of parts, not a flowing system. For a moment, he stayed silent, the old fear gripping his throat, the voice in his head telling him to stay in his lane, to just be the guy who stacks the boxes. But then he saw the foreman pick up a sledgehammer, desperation in his eyes, ready to force the machine back into submission, a move Leo knew would destroy the delicate internal bearings instantly. Something snapped inside him, louder than the glass that had broken in the garage all those years ago. Before he could think, Leo was moving, pushing past the mechanics, shouting for them to stop. The warehouse went quiet. Dozens of eyes staring at the quiet kid who never said more than 2 words a shift. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird, but his hands were steady. He didn't have tools, just his eyes and that innate sense of balance he had tried so hard to kill. He reached into the mechanism, ignoring the grease and the heat, and found the tension spring. It wasn't about force, it was about flow. He adjusted the angle, feeling the vibration through his fingertips, listening to the hum of the metal until it harmonized with the rhythm he felt in his gut. With a gentle push, a click resonated through the cavernous room, and the belt shuddered, then began to move, smooth and silent. The roar of approval from the floor was deafening, but Leo barely heard it. He was staring at his hands, covered in oil and grime, and for the first time in years, he didn't see the hands of a box stacker. He saw the hands of a creator. That night, he didn't go to sleep. He went to the garage. The dust was thick, cobwebs spanning the corners where his old workbench used to be, but the air felt electric. He didn't try to fix the sculpture he had broken years ago. That belonged to a different Leo, a boy who needed validation. Instead, he started something new. He gathered scrap metal from the junkyard, broken appliance parts, discarded gears, and he began to build. He built not for his father, not for the town, but for the sheer, terrifying joy of bringing something to life. He realized then that his mistake hadn't been breaking the sculpture or failing to impress his dad. His mistake was believing that his value was determined by someone else's understanding of it. He had ignored his potential because it didn't fit the mold he was given, not realizing that the entire point of potential is to break the mold. The sculpture he built wasn't just a machine. It was a story. It was a towering, kinetic structure of steel and light, a chaotic mess of gears that, when set in motion, aligned perfectly to cast a shadow on the wall. A shadow of a man taking flight. When he finally unveiled it at the county art fair, not expecting to win, just needing to show it, his father was there. The old man walked around the sculpture, watching the gears spin, listening to the soft whir of the bearings. He looked at the shadow on the wall. Then he looked at Leo. He didn't smile, and he didn't clap. He just placed a hand on Leo's shoulder, a heavy, grounding weight, and said, "I didn't see it before. I see it now." It wasn't an apology, and it didn't fix everything. But it was enough. Leo understood then that character isn't built in the easy moments, in the natural talents or the smooth successes. Character is built in the silence after the glass breaks. It is forged in the years of darkness where you have to choose, over and over again, to believe in a light you cannot see. He had wasted years hiding his gift, but those wasted years were the fuel he needed to burn brighter than he ever could have as a child. He learned that the biggest tragedy isn't failing. It's succeeding at something that doesn't matter to you. The mistake of ignoring his own potential was the fire that eventually hardened his resolve, turning a fragile talent into an unbreakable purpose. We all have a sculpture in the garage, a broken dream we swept into the corner because the world told us it was useless. But the pieces are still there. The potential never left. It is waiting for you to stop looking for permission and start moving your hands again. Because the world doesn't need more people who fit in. It needs people who are brave enough to stand out, to fix the broken machines, to build the impossible structures, and to cast shadows that prove we were meant to fly.